We are live. Welcome back to episode 25 of the Endless Report here on the Endless Studios YouTube channel. We got a huge week of gaming news today. So as always, I'm going to get into the show pretty quickly here because we have a ton to cover. We're going to see if we can get it within the hour. It may end up being a little longer today. We're going to really try to get it in that hour though and make that work. We have a ton of stories, probably the biggest Endless Report here so far today. So excited to get into all the news with you guys. But starting off, I want to kind of recap a bit of last week. We had a lot of speculation last week about the newer conferences going on, what Sony's doing, what Nintendo's doing, what Marvel and Disney are doing this week. That's all coming up this weekend. We got a lot more to talk about with that. So actually during last week's episode, we got some more gameplay from God of War. So that's what we're going to start off with today. We're going to get to that in a second. We also got some more news on that Assassin's Creed showcase happening tomorrow afternoon. So we're going to definitely talk about that near the end of the show today and get us prepared for that tomorrow, as well as the Disney and Marvel games showcase coming on tonight at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So that's going to be a little after the show. I was thinking about maybe getting it closer to the showcase, but a little too late in the docket today. But we're going to prep for that show. We're going to talk about what I expect to see there, what's going on with that showcase, and hopefully it'll be a great, some great announcements tonight, and we'll cover it on next week's show for sure. So next week's show is going to be pretty jam-packed as well. We also have the Nintendo Direct we were talking about maybe happening. That seems like it's still happening early next week as well. So we'll probably have a lot of game announcements next week. It's going to be pretty exciting on the show, but we definitely have a ton to talk about today as well. So I'm going to get right into it, as I said, with that God of War gameplay that we saw revealed right at the end of last week. It was literally during the episode 24 of the show, actually. So I'm going to get that playing in the background here. Again, you're not going to hear too much audio on the stream here. I'm not sure you're going to hear the audio output, but I want to make sure you can see this video and get a glimpse here at God of War Ragnarok. Again, this is the first gameplay we've really seen of this game in a year since late 2021 when we got a quick trailer at the last PlayStation showcase. Again, speaking of showcases, it's been a full year now, actually, today or yesterday, since the 2021 PlayStation showcase. Again, that's something I've been talking about a lot on the show. When are we going to see more God of War, more Spider-Man, maybe from something from Sucker Punch or Blue Point Studios? There's a lot of studios at PlayStation right now we're curious about. So we're wondering when that's happening. Again, it's been a full year since that first, that 2021 showcase, and the first kind of, I would set the stage for, the post-COVID, I guess the way Sony's been handling their showcases post E3, post-COVID kind of world. It's been a little different, but again, we're about a year out since their last one, since they've been doing these yearly showcases. We're wondering what's happening for 2022. Many people actually rumored that September 8th, that's yesterday now as of recording this, would be the PlayStation showcase date. Obviously, that passed and went through, and that didn't happen. We're still waiting on what's going on here. We've seen some more, we saw PSVR 2 delayed to early 2023 out of fall 2022. So that maybe gives some more reason to think there's not as much to show there. Or maybe there is, maybe since that delay, it's still happening in spring 2023. There's plenty to talk about with that. I'm sure there's plenty to talk about with Spider-Man as well. Maybe Wolverine in the future, as well as a lot of other PlayStation games here. But that's the last of that initial God of War gameplay. Very, very short, actually. We got some exclusive coverage from Game Informer there. Again, not much to say on that game, to be honest. The reason I kind of just let that run and talked about Sony for now is because I do think that what they're showing this God of War gameplay here, again, not to be too critical or anything, it does look very similar to God of War, the previous reboot game. So I'm curious to see. I feel like something's being hidden here. And I'm going to show this next gameplay video as I talk about this, because there's actually 2 Game Informer videos we got this week for God of War Ragnarok. And this gives some slower kind of atmospheric gameplay of the environments. As you can see here, we're getting the classic boat rowing sequences we saw from the previous God of War game with Kratos and Atreus here in the boat. I'm very curious to see what else is going on here. Again, I don't want to get into too deep into spoilers, on this podcast here. I don't like to ruin games for anybody who hasn't played the God of War series yet. But what I will say is I am wondering if there's more here than meets the eye. I'm wondering if there's something that happens in this game here that changes the gameplay quite a bit, and we're only seeing earlier sequences to kind of hide that. I feel like, again, not to give too many spoilers here from the first, I shouldn't say first God of War game. It's the reboot here from the God of War series, but the first of this God of War Nordic games, I should say, if that works, the Norse mythology games. There are some switches during the story. There are some things that happen where, the gameplay switches up. You get different weapons. You can see here he's using the Chaos Blades, classic from the older God of War games. Those blades actually, you don't have those at the beginning of the previous God of War game. I guess it's not too much of a spoiler there, but you don't have those blades from the classic God of War games at the beginning of this new one. That's something you get mid-game, but it definitely changes the gameplay. I think it gives you a second tool set of weaponries and power-ups and specials along those weapons to deal with. And I'm thinking maybe in this game we see something else. We see something else from Norse mythology. The big one, I think, maybe Thor's hammer. Maybe we get some more things with Atreus here, as and being able to help you more in this combat. There's a lot more that I could see happening to expand God of War Ragnarok's gameplay. And again, a lot of what we've seen here looks very great, very cinematic, atmospheric, but it looks like more of, the God of War we've seen from 2018. So I'm really wondering here if they have something up their sleeves and there's something that happens mid-game or maybe early game where there's a big twist and we get something else that we're not really expecting. And that would make sense given how little they've shown in this game. Again, a lot of that to me has been mostly, it's COVID, it's delay season. It's been this whole year of everybody getting back on track, dealing with, the lack of staffing and the lack of, certain organizations when it comes to, changing the way offices work, switching from work at home back to office. There's a lot going on. I don't want to speak for any developers personally with how they've handled things. I mean, we've seen a lot of great releases and, a lot of great things happen during this time as well. So I don't want to say everyone's dealing with a lot of issues here, but it definitely is an unprecedented time when it comes to, the office culture of these studios and how these games are getting made. So it is something to consider and take into consideration there. But that being said, I think maybe it's not, in terms of just having a tough time with marketing, maybe it is they're really just trying to keep their cards close to their sleeves here. And there is something they just don't want to show until the game releases. It could, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt there. It could be very interesting. Again, I don't think the game's looking troubling or anything like that. It doesn't look, bad by any means. I did see some criticism when this game was first announced back a year ago that it did look a little bit similar. And I'll play that trailer again just to give a little bit visual here as I speak on this. I did see some people say around a year ago when they were looking at this, like, yeah, it looks like the first, the God of War 2018 game. And I wouldn't disagree, of course. It's going to look, it is a direct sequel to that game. I'm not expecting anything groundbreakingly different in terms of the, the structure of the game, the playable character. Of course, the sequel is going to look similar. So I think it got a little too harsh criticism, I think, at that point when it was getting some criticism for looking a little similar. That being said, we're closer to release here. This is a PS5 game. I mean, again, graphically, it looks very nice. I'm looking at it here on my side monitor, the video you guys are seeing on screen. And I'm liking what I see. I think it looks great. Again, there's some kind of slower environmental gameplay showing some interaction. Is there anything groundbreakingly different that would really make my jaw drop and go, wow, this is a huge step up from the, last God of War game? Not necessarily. Then again, I'm thinking, why show, all your cards before the game's even released? They're probably sitting on, the boss battles, the huge sequences, the big events. There's so much that goes into Ragnarok. This is going to be the fall of this whole, civilization here, this whole, Norse mythology. It's Ragnarok. It's the end of times. There's going to be a huge, cataclysmic events going on in this game. So them just showing the classic, rowing the boat and walking around and some smaller, combat sequences with some lower level enemies. I feel like they're kind of just teasing us here to what's actually going to come, in the huge, bigger moments of the game. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, this wasn't enough. Because I see a lot of that on the internet. People are wondering where this footage is coming. Is this concerning from Sony? I think it's more of the opposite. I think this is, Sony Santa Monica wanting to keep the surprise of this game, intact. They know that the hype is there and that the fan attention is there. So I'm very curious to see what comes of that. Again, I'm going to keep my eyes on God of War, but we're going to move on because, as I said before, we have a ton of other stories today, actually, and I really want to get into a ton of it. I'm looking at my tabs here. I'll put this on the screen, actually, just so you all can see. We have a lot to get through on the top of the docket here, so I'm going to keep going, and we're going to move on to the next story. This one's very interesting. Another acquisition story, actually. We're going to get back to them back at the end of the show here, but we're going to talk a bit about Ubisoft for a minute. So speaking of Tencent, we talked last week about how Sony and Tencent together had both taken a stake in From Software, the creators of, the Souls franchise, Elden Ring, both notably being their most recent release. Sony and Tencent both took a chunk out of the parent company who owns From Software last week. And now we see Tencent making another move this week by taking a stake in the Guillemot Brothers Incorporated. Again, apologies there if I'm mispronouncing the name. Yves Guillemot is someone who has been around Ubisoft for the longest time, pretty much as long as I can remember. Again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing his name there. But he has been this company, the Guillemot brothers, have been the owners and the kind of leads of Ubisoft for basically as long as I can remember, since I've been into video games and looking into the news and reading about Ubisoft. But here we see that their parent company, who is has a large the majority ownership stake in Ubisoft currently, has just strengthened its ties with Tencent, who apparently already had some stakes here, and and of course has had some deals with Ubisoft in the past. But they are now taking a minority passive stake in the Guillemot Brothers Limited for about $297 million. I believe that's US dollars, if I'm correct here. So again, as I often say on these stories, I'm not an economist. I wouldn't want anyone here to be looking to me for how this is going to affect these companies financially. Again, that's something we're going to have to remain to be seen, and how successful this deal is going to be. That's not something I could honestly predict to a really great extent. That's something we're going to have to see financially. But in terms of the creative, avenues that comes from this, and the decisions that Ubisoft is going to make, maybe in lieu of this new management and this new money and all this going on, I think I maybe speak on a little bit personally. So I think it's very interesting here this has happened. Again, like I said, the Guillemot family still retains their control of Ubisoft here. So as you can see here in the government, it's unchanged there on who's governing the company. They're retaining their exclusive control. But, that being said, Tencent now owns a large stake in their parent company. Again, not a majority stake there. They still own their own company, and they're still basically in control there, therefore, of Ubisoft. Again, but that being said, they did give Tencent a large stake here. Tencent has made a lot of moves similar to a lot of other players in the space, but they have a lot of partnerships as well as ownership stakes in a lot of companies in the gaming sphere, not just in China, but now in the US as well. They've been expanding a lot, and they're a huge player in the worldwide market. So definitely, if you're not familiar with the name Tencent, I've been saying that a lot on the show here, definitely a name to be familiar with if you're looking into game acquisitions. And as we often have this conversation about, are we getting into monopoly territory? How is the industry going to go forward here with a lot of these acquisitions and large conglomerations and consolidations, really, I should say, of all these companies into smaller groups? I think it's something you should really look into if you're interested in the future of the industry, and Tencent is definitely one of the big names there to be looking at to see how these things get consolidated. But I do think that this is overall probably a good thing. We see a lot of these stories here with how gaming is very expensive. It can be very risky. That being said, a lot more companies, especially outside of the gaming sphere, are taking note of the revenue that can be, come with gaming. They're realizing the potential here of the industry monetarily wise. I think a lot of people are investing in gaming from all corners of the entertainment industry. So I think it's definitely something to be aware of. Again, I do want to read this last quote here from Yves Guillemot, the CEO and the co-founder of Ubisoft here, speaking on the deal. He did say the expansion of the concert with Tencent further reinforces Ubisoft's core shareholding around its founders and provides the company with the stability essential for its long-term development. That's what he said officially on the deal there. Again, makes sense. It's giving them some financial boost here while also not losing the control of their company. They still have the creative, control here to say what they want to do with the company. Again, they probably have to answer to some people from Tencent. Again, I'm not an economist here. I'm not exactly sure about how this works here, but I do know that there is no, Tencent doesn't have any rights here to put a foot down. I think of, in film, like the final cut, kind of saying, and again, the very, different analogy here, but who has the final cut? Who has the final saying in what this is going to look like? I still think the Guillemot brothers, have that control over the final say of what's going on in Ubisoft. That being said, I hope that, Tencent maybe puts the trust in them to, continue that. Ubisoft has had a rough, year or two, I would say, with the status of a lot of their franchises, the status of their internal dealings. They have not been immune to the scandals and the things that have been going on in the industry and the comeuppance of that. And I'm hoping that, they have a more positive, culture there, and that has been kind of rooted out. And this could be a more positive, future for the company, going forward with more investment into not only their games, their development teams and their culture. I think that's, again, a lot of moving pieces here, a lot of deals like this. I feel like every week another company is either getting acquired or is getting, another company's stake put into them. So it's a lot of moving pieces here. I feel like we're gonna have to wait and see with these, as I always say, a lot going on in the industry. We're gonna see how the cards, how the pieces fall in the future here. But I do want to continue on with Ubisoft. We're gonna have more to talk about them later today. We talk about that Assassin's Creed conference coming up tomorrow, actually. So around the end of the show, we're gonna talk about Ubisoft again. But moving on here, we talked about this last week on the show, actually. So it's an update on an announcement we got last week that there would be a Cyberpunk 2077 announcement. We did get some news that CD Projekt Red was going to have a conference last week. And again, that did happen, of course. And here we are on Friday with Cyberpunk 2077, announcing their first real, large DLC expansion. And also simultaneously announcing this is only coming for next-gen consoles and PC. So therefore, basically stopping support for the last generation of consoles and focusing in on the new generation here and polishing this game up. So, of course, if you've been following Cyberpunk, or in general, or the gaming industry in general for the last few years, you're probably aware of Cyberpunk 2077's harsh, rough launch here. They did not have the best launch, especially for a game that was so incredibly hyped by the fan base, by the games industry. It's been a game that was announced years ago. I mean, it's literally over a decade ago this game was announced. I remember being a kid when I first saw the trailer, thinking, wow, what is this? Knowing it was from the Witcher developers, being an RPG fan at the time, it was something that excited me. It was always kind of on the docket. It was almost like a Half-Life 3 or a Fallout 4 even at the time, if you will, where those games where you never thought they were going to come out. Eventually, games like Fallout 4, Cyberpunk did come out. Maybe not to the extent of excitement that everybody would have liked. And we could talk about fan expectations, what people thought there about what would have happened, and that's definitely part of the equation. I think people definitely expected a much more in-depth and the RPG of all RPGs type game. That being said, both not that the game had low quality or anything, but with the certain quality of the story plus the issues and the bugs and the actual quality of life issues this game had at launch that took a long time to get out of, especially on older generation consoles and really consoles in general. Anything that really wasn't PC, it took a long time for this game to get to the state it needed to be well after launch, and it suffered a lot of the consequences of launching in a really unfortunately buggy and unplayable state for many people. So this game's been on on a comeback for a while. Been trying to get back into the popular sphere here and get some of this notoriety back. Again, they have had a lot of updates for the past year. There was a large update, maybe slower than people would have wanted, but there was an update about a year after the game's release that did improve a lot of the bugs, improved a lot of sections of the game that were maybe broken or led to other sections that weren't working properly. They got that fixed up here. Again, this was something that it's kind of a sour note for a lot of gamers. A lot of people still haven't gone back to this game. Some people have and said, it's really not that bad now. It's really actually a great game. That being said, I'm one of the people who have held off. I still haven't gone back into it. Maybe, with this expansion here, I'm sure that's going to promote. I think they even said a fully fledged new police system and kind of a city awareness system based on your character. Maybe more, you see clips of this game where, you're doing things in the game causing chaos and characters really aren't reacting. So maybe, more AI systems. I heard that was something they're improving. They're looking to add in this game with the updates. So it's not just DLC, but also some quality of life improvements. Excuse me. Some improvements in the base game. Seems like a positive development here. We see that. I will play this brief teaser trailer. I haven't seen much as myself. We're getting an ad here, so I'll let that run for a minute as we wait for that to load up. But we do see we're actually getting Keanu Reeves returning for his role as Johnny Silverhand, I believe, in this game. So very interesting. He's coming back on for his role again. After all of the negativity around this game, it's good to see that they're still getting the positivity. They're still getting, their actors and the high-profile nature of this game is still alive and well to some extent. Again, I'm going to let this footage play a bit as I wrap up on my ideas here. But I do think this is something that's, I will maybe look back into later on 2023 whenever this drops. Again, we didn't get a release date here, but it is coming next year. So we will see exactly what goes on here. Again, it looks like they're getting into some more, more of the political cyber, future, warfare thing here. There's a lot more of this implications. I believe that they say a new America, the United States. So this kind of dystopian future America type themes here. Again, not too aware. Again, I haven't played the base game, obviously, so not too aware of what they're expanding on from those missions in the base game. I've only played a bit of a trial, actually. I should know it. I played a few hours of Cyberpunk 2077, but only right at the beginning of the game and kind of introducing you to the world. So I can't speak much on the intricacies of the story, maybe what happened at the end of Cyberpunk that may lead into some of these, narratives. But we'll have to see in 2023 exactly how that goes. Again, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't played. I really can't spoil much as I haven't played the full game myself. So we're going to have to wait and see on the future of Cyberpunk. But that's, again, one of those games where it had a rocky launch. It's had a rocky, cycle to an extent, but I think it's on, it's on the mend here. It looks like it can, really have a resurgence in 2023. We'll have to wait and see on that. Again, there were more news in the Witcher series and the future of that from CD Projekt Red, the same studio. It seems like after this DLC, they're pretty much done with Cyberpunk and are ready to move on to The Witcher 4 and beyond. And actually, I didn't bring up an article for it, but it's worth mentioning that Cyberpunk developer CD Projekt Red also noted this week that the Witcher series coming up will not just be Witcher 4, an extension of the original Witcher trilogy, but its own start of a new Witcher trilogy and a new series of games. So we're going to have to wait and see what's next from CD Projekt Red. We'll wait and see how that Cyberpunk expansion comes out next year, if we get any more Witcher news from them next year. But again, we'll have to see in 2023. But moving on here again to something that's unfortunately another game that had a very rocky launch and is still, I would say, not really on the mend, that is still dealing with a lot of rocky issues here, is still in the news this week. And that is, of course, Halo Infinite. I probably talked for this game about 20 to 30 minutes last week about my personal opinions on it, my disappointments, the community's disappointments around this game. And unfortunately, this headline here is kind of a head scratcher where, again, a lot of what I talked about last week, if you missed last show, was about how back in Halo 5's development when 343 was dealing with a lot of the issues they had with Halo 4. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole backstory of them again, but they got, if you're not aware of the Halo series, 343 took on the reins of the series from Bungie back at their Halo 3 and Reach. Halo Reach was Bungie's last Halo game as they moved on to Destiny and leaving Xbox and and going all into Destiny and doing their own thing there. So 343 has had issues with Halo really from the get-go. Halo 4 was a bit divisive with a lot of players. Halo 5 had a lot of issues of not... Oh, my camera's jumping around here. Excuse me. Had a lot of issues with not having a lot of the core custom games and Halo features people wanted. Things like split-screen co-op, being able to sit on the couch with a buddy and play through the campaign or play split-screen games. They did not have that at launch. There was a huge complaint for Halo 5, and it was something that the Halo developers came out and said, we realized we made a mistake here. It's the core of Halo, and we're not going to ever launch a Halo game again with no split screen. Here we are, as you can see at the headline, I'm getting there. Here we are in 2022, where Halo Infinite launched in 2021, a year late. Still didn't have the split screen co-op like it promised it would. Said we realized we should have had that. We're gonna add to the game, we promise. Now over a year later, they come out and say, because we're focusing on other competitive aspects of the game and other things, we're canceling split screen co-op, and they're still delayed on Forge mode and other custom games mode that are really core to the classic Halo experience. So now we see, again, I said all my opinion on that, so I'm not gonna get too deeper into that. This week, I talked about it, ad nauseum last week, really. But now we come back with another update on this, saying that players actually were able to make split screen co-op work in the game, and that it's not something that's not possible from 343's development, but rather just isn't being enabled or isn't working. We've seen here that players have actually gone through a hack on their menus where you go in, you sign in, you sign out. There's a lot of, funky steps here to like tricking the game into thinking people are playing the game, but they're not. So again, it's not the way the game is supposed to be interacted with. It's kind of, a way you play around with your Xbox accounts here and kind of finick and mess with what's going on with the system. So it's not an official fix here, but players have figured out how to actually get split screen co-op local on their couches and can do this. And here's a tutorial on Twitter of how to do it. And it's a very kind of convoluted process, but in the end, you can get a split screen co-op going here. And people are kind of upset with this. Not that it's, that it's possible, rather that it is possible. And 343 has said still that it's not, and they have no plans on adding it at this point. So it's kind of, like I said before, kind of something makes you scratch your head and go, what happened here? If it was something that's, possible within the game, and people have tested this over the course of this last week, and there's seemingly no game crashes, no big errors, at least that anybody's realized so far. I'm not sure if anybody's played through the entire campaign through this way yet, but a lot of people have tried this and have had no problems, no issues where it's like anything game breaking, anything that's not stable, where it couldn't be official release. So again, maybe I'm talking too soon here. Maybe there is something that isn't stable about this, but this begs the question of why can't 343 come in here and update this and make this fix just work, organically within the game system. I'm not sure why this is still an issue, especially in 2022. Again, I've heard what they've said about, this not being a core feature. Again, I obviously disagreed with that to an extent about what I thought what should be a core feature of Halo. And it seems the community at large, I mean, I've seen people who I followed for many years who have been Xbox, either people on YouTube or people in the industry that cover them extensively, and are journalists who are all people I would think would stay very loyal and very, excited about Xbox gaming news, were all turned around and said, wait a minute, should 343 still have this license? What's going on with Halo? Is it time for Halo to branch out and get somebody new under the Activision deal, the Bethesda deal? Microsoft has a lot of options here. Should they pass it on to another studio? That's the question I've seen on articles, on YouTube videos all this past week. Since I had that episode, last week, I had the same opinion as well. So it was kind of funny to go on after the last week's podcast and go, oh, so I'm not the only one who's a little upset about this. It's not just me as a Halo fan who's a little, confused or upset about what's going on with the franchise here. So again, I have not much else to say on it other than it works here. So it's really even, reinforces my confusion on why can't we just fix these issues. And it seems more of an ideology of what Halo is trying to be right now, or is maybe in shambles of what it's trying to be right now versus what we want Halo to be. And I hope that this franchise could turn around here. Again, we've seen it's possible to get these things working. It's possible to have a really fun time in Halo Infinite. Don't get me wrong. Like I said last week, I love the gameplay. I think it's probably the smoothest Halo gameplay we ever got. It just doesn't have the core, Halo game modes. This was a game that launched and it didn't have Slayer, which is the most classic Halo game mode of all time. People can say, oh, there was a mosh pit mode and they wanted to get people to try all the different modes at once. But I don't know. I'm someone who's played, for lack of a better term, I'm a veteran of Halo. I played these games since I was very, very young. If I just want to play a team deathmatch game, which is basically Slayer, for those of you who aren't Halo fans, it's team deathmatch essentially. If I just want to play a Slayer match in Halo, it's something that's been happening since the first game in the early 2000s. Like that's something I should just be able to do. It shouldn't be something that's locked behind, a paywall or a randomizer wall. We have to wait some community event. It was just too much. There was so much going for this game, and that's why I feel so disappointed. Not because it was such a disappointment in general, because it had so much going for it, but all of the organization and the management around it has just been, I feel, shooting itself in the foot, for a lack of a better analogy here, nonstop since the beginning. So again, I'm hoping, as I said last week, for a better future for Halo here. We'll see what can happen with these features here. Then again, we see the futures are possible. We saw it last week with some of those cool Forge creations in the Forge beta. If only these things can be more accessible to everyone, and it didn't take like an online community or a tutorial or something like this to get these kind of rare events going. This should be like the bread and butter of Halo. This should be something that people are doing in Halo all the time. So again, I digress there. I'm going to move on. Actually, back to the PlayStation side of things here as we continue on this huge docket of news this week. So speaking of PlayStation's conference here and PSVR at the beginning of the show, I spoke on how PSVR has been delayed to early 2023. That doesn't mean we are not getting any news from PSVR. We have another news story here about Firewall Ultra. So this comes after the sequel to the Firewall title that released back on PSVR 1. This is not a game I played personally. I did not actually have the PSVR original, but there was a game back on PSVR called Firewall 0 Hour. And in Firewall 0 Hour, it was kind of like a VR FPS, very limited in scope, I would say, because of VR game mechanics. But that being said, you kind of had these special ops missions where you can go in, maybe with the VR controllers in your hands here. I'm kind of using them demonstratively here, but as a pistol, or you're kind of a secret agent and you're going around trying to solve, these situations here. That being said, we get a reveal of Firewall Ultra this week, which is the sequel to Firewall 0 Hour from the original PSVR, and it'll be coming exclusively to PSVR 2. So as I go through here, I do believe we did get this short trailer here. There it is. Perfect. It's playing right on the article here. You could see, I'm actually going to restart that so you can get a better glimpse here. But you could see the character kind of like a James Bond, secret agent type of scenario here, has that pistol there with the flashlight. And then you see we have some enemy movement here. They're hacking in. They're getting secret data. Again, kind of like this special op. You're the secret agent. You're going in and you're getting this flash drive and you're getting out of there. It seems very cool. Again, this is saying capture from in-the-game engine. This is not official gameplay or anything. So, take this gameplay here with a grain of salt. This may not be exactly how it looks within the headset. That being said, I don't imagine it to look too, much less impressive than this in the headset. We've seen that official gameplay from the Horizon PSVR game. We've seen other VR headsets on PC and what they can do currently with, graphically wise, and knowing PSVR specs exceeding a lot of the current, VR PC headsets. I think, it's reasonable to be excited for what these games are going to look like and to think it may look pretty similar to what we're seeing on screen, if not even more interesting in certain contexts. Again, we'll have to wait and see exactly when PSVR drops in 2023 and whenever this game drops here. But we do know this game is going to have 4K HDR. It's going to have that eye tracking we talked about and that foveated rendering. A lot of these features we talked about with PSVR here, it's all there. And it also uses that Sense technology with the DualSense VR controllers. Now we're going to get, 2 individual hands there. We'll see how the haptics on those controllers works. Again, obviously they haven't been released yet. I haven't had them in my hand, neither has anyone else, but I can imagine if they're anything like the DualSense, as they've said, the haptics, and they even had the finger tracking like on other VR headsets and controllers where you can move your fingers around, and in game you'll see your actual fingers moving from the camera sensors that are tracking them. So they'll have touch and finger detection, eyeball movement detection. It's gonna be crazy. We're gonna have to wait and see exactly what this all does on PSVR again and how it ties into the game. But I'm pretty excited though. Again, the more we see from these PlayStation announcements, we also saw, I didn't bring it up an article for it because I thought it was kind of an aside, but we did see, it's a big news week this week, but we did see some new PS5 skins. You got a camouflage shell and a new camouflage controller and headset for the console. So again, just some new customization, peripherals and stuff, and nothing new on that end. We also got, which I do want to highlight here in a moment, some new software updates from PlayStation. So I'm going to bring this up. We also got some new revisions to both the software and actually the hardware of the PS5. We're going to talk on that next. But here I want to cover this briefly. We finally got that 1440p update I've been talking about a lot on the show. It's something that, especially for my friends of mine who have PC monitors, a few of my friends are very happy about this over this past week. Here, you can finally play these games in 1440p, which also opens up a ton of new graphical options. A friend of mine who has a 1440p monitor has told me that he now is able to play Spider-Man remastered in 1440p and 120 FPS, which is something he was not able to do before since he was locked into the 1080p settings. So now it's something that's very positive, not just for people with 1440p monitors, people who are looking to buying a PS5 in the future. You have way more options, and especially with looking at those PlayStation monitors they released recently, it seems like they had this update in mind. That's an option as well, those new official PlayStation monitors. As well. That being said, there are a lot of other great PC monitor options. I'm not sure if I would be the person to buy a PlayStation exclusive, monitor like that, especially with those white, the styling there. It's a very polarizing. It's a very bright monitor. It looks like the PS5 here has the white paneling. It's not like a black, or gray panel like usual monitors have. That being said, it's all good news from that. Again, there are some issues here. Again, it's in typical Sony fashion. They release a feature, it's having with VRR and some other features as well. It's not, and 120 hertz mode. It's not perfect at launch here. There's some bugs we need to fix here. Again, we did have some issues with some people having with the 120 hertz mode. There may be some issues around HDMI 2.0 and how they're still dealing with the older technologies there. So it remains to be seen if they're going to patch some of the small issues people have been having with this. But that being said, for the most part, I've seen most people be able to get a solid 1440p resolution and have everything work properly. The only other thing that I think is notable here, again, we did see the voice commands addition, something I've been able to do a while on other voice command devices with YouTube. So it's nice that PlayStation has added voice command features, kind of expanding the Hey PlayStation function. Again, this is not something I use personally. I keep that off. I personally don't like anything like the Amazon Alexa or Siri, where if you say, Hey Siri or Hey Alexa, the thing pops up, because that means that it's listening for Hey Siri or Hey Alexa or Hey PlayStation, whatever it may be, at all times. So you're always being recorded for everything you say, regardless of what it is. And I'm not a big fan of being recorded at all times. Personally, I'm someone who's very conscious of a lot of the privacy concerns with a lot of these devices. So not a feature for me. Then again, if you don't really care about that stuff as much as I do, and what you're saying that's in the Sony voice logs there, then go ahead. That's a great feature. It makes searching YouTube videos so much easier because it's, again, if you're not using the keyboard or the controller keyboard, PlayStation's a little better than like remote controls on TV, YouTube. Again, there are worse scenarios for this where the voice controls are more necessary. That being said, there are people who, accessibility options may not be able to use these other features, and a voice control may be the only way they can interact with it. So accessibility wise, this is 100% a positive, regardless if it helps me out or not here. If I use it, I'm sure this is helping many people. So it's a good thing. I'm happy to see that as well. The last thing I did want to cover here is I could see they had that here. There were some new share screen options as well. The last thing was the game lists feature. I'm not sure if they have this outright on the blog post here, but they did. Oh, here it is. It's in the headline, but maybe not a screenshot or a walkthrough in these screenshots here. But you can see that they added finally game lists, which are basically game folders. So you can go into your collection now on PlayStation. You can categorize things. Hey, I want all my FPS games here. I want all my family games here. I want my current, this is my backlog, or, the games I want to play next. You could organize your games in many different ways you'd like to. Again, a really nice quality of life feature. And overall, it's not a huge update, but the 1440p feature was very huge for a lot of people. And then some of the quality of life updates around that and the share play features and all that is very positive as well. Then again, I want to keep moving on here with Sony. We're a little over halfway through the show. I'm still about not even really halfway through my story. So I'm going to keep picking it up here. Again, I'm going to go right to this next Sony story. As I said before, we had some rumors, not even rumors, some news here about Sony's revisions here for the PS5. So before we get into any concerns here about new PS5s, if you just bought a PS5, don't worry about that. This is not a PS5 Pro. This is not a new version or anything like that. This is just one of the revisions that manufacturers do, as they always do. You can see this for generation to generation, from a developer, platform to platform. If something happens with the Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, you name it, where a few weeks later after original production, they'll realize, oh, we can save money in manufacturing here if we make this new part, we use this new part that just released from one of our providers. Maybe it's in this case, there are new motherboards, there are new heat sinks, there are a lot of new pieces coming out, or new ways that their engineers have realized they can format their heat sinks and all this stuff to get the same results from the PS5 while having maybe a cheaper or a lighter console at the same time. So at the same time as Sony's raising prices on the PS5, they're also finding cheaper, smaller components to make it more efficient for them to manufacture. That being said, if you are buying this new PS5, you can see here, this is the original. This is the one, the 1100. It's probably the one I own. I own the launch edition PS5. So whenever it came out in 2020, that's the one I have. Very heavy console. It's a console I used to take actually through TSA on planes a lot. It was not a console I liked traveling with. I used to travel with my PS4 back when I was traveling a lot initially, and having to switch from a PS4 to having a PS5, I basically had to have a separate duffel bag almost right for my PS5 and then some clothes. It had like its own bag because the thing is so freaking heavy. It's like 15 and a half pounds, that thing. So hopefully, I know that the goal here, as you see in the 1,000, it's a little bit, the CD looks like a smaller chassis. It actually looks like the plastic chassis may be a little smaller here. I'm not fully aware on that. It's something I'm going to have to look into dimensions wise. But if you look at these pictures here, you can definitely tell of the interior, the motherboard, the piece of this heatsink, like all of these pieces have changed. Again, obviously the smaller pieces like the processor, parts of the motherboard, I'm not sure how in depth they have changed. Again, they go side by side here in this article to show how differently this is. Again, the main unit here, the motherboard, the heatsink, pretty much everything on the internal besides this fan cover and the plastic and the power supply up on top is about 3.5 pounds. They've been able to take that main PS5, motherboard unit down to about 2.5 pounds now with this last model. So from about a half-pound decrease to about another half-pound decrease since the launch here. So if you're buying a PS5 now, one of those new editions, again, maybe not the ones that are in store right now, those Horizon editions, maybe in a month or so when these new editions start rolling out, you're going to at least have at least a half or full pound lighter PS5 than people like me who've previously bought PS5s do. So overall, it's a good thing. The console's probably lighter, probably a little more efficient on some standpoints. But again, there's no switches to the specs here. There's no new processor, no new SSD, nothing like that. It's not like you're getting any advantage per se, performance-wise, over the original PS5. It's not a PS5 Pro. Then again, though, if you buy one now, you're probably getting some quality of life improvements over the original PS5. Maybe it won't be, as loud in the long run. It may not build up dust in certain ways in the long run. It may not be as heavy, for you just to carry. Obviously, that's the main thing. But again, we'll remain to see how much more efficient these new components are. Maybe they are just cheaper for Sony to produce, and they are just kind of around the same efficiency. Usually, that's the case here. Usually, the efficiency is somewhat negligible, and in these situations, and it's more so for Sony's sake here, how many PS5s they can get out for a certain cost in a certain amount of time. It's really the main benefit, the main person benefiting here, I should say, would be Sony. But then again, we're going to move on. That's not much news elsewhere there on the PS5. As I said, it's really just this revision of their manufacturing techniques. Again, we've heard about the PS5 price hike last week. We've heard about the updates. There's not much else going on with the PS5 other than, news on games. We're dying to hear what Sony's doing right now. It's been a full year since we've had anything in terms of like a showcase from them. So we're really, really looking for Sony's next move. I feel like there could be a Sony showcase announced any day now. I would almost dare say that we could get one next week, and I may be talking about that showcase on the next episode. Not sure about that. Maybe too wishful thinking there, but I really think we may get an announcement next week. Maybe we get an announcement, and then the week after we get a Sony showcase. Again, it was September 9th or 8th, I believe, last year. It's been a year. It's about time to hear from Sony again. Again, we're getting all these smaller updates from them. The new controller, the new skins for the, and controller skins for the console. You have, big software updates we've been waiting months for. We got some updates on that Discord partnership. That's a big deal for PlayStation as well. We're waiting on more on that this fall. There's a lot going on with PlayStation. I digress. We're going to wait on them, and see what they have on the docket. But moving back to Xbox, actually, this is one of the last things we're going to talk about Xbox here. Before we get into the big story this week, I have a lot at the end here. Again, we're probably going to be going to the hour. I'm going to try to go a little quicker here so I can get this all in a reasonable time frame. Again, but a lot to discuss here. So our last minor story, I would say, in terms of like the news back and forth. And then we have some big news in terms of PlayStation versus Xbox and the whole console wars kind of argument you see online a lot. We have some big statements from both Jim Ryan and Phil Spencer of PlayStation and Xbox respectively in terms of Call of Duty, in terms of the kind of the war right now and exclusive games and their Game Pass versus PlayStation Plus. It's getting interesting. It's getting kind of crazy, and I'm surprised that on a public level these companies are actually kind of devolving down to where it is right now. So I digress. I'm going to talk about that later, and I don't get too into that. But right now, before we hop into that story, I do want to talk about some other minor announcements from Xbox as I did with PlayStation. So Xbox, maybe in response to last week's announcement of PlayStation's DualSense Edge, where they basically had their own version of the Xbox Elite controller. You may be familiar with Scuff controllers as well, a third-party solution to this who makes PlayStation controllers similar to this. But now Xbox, in response to this, announces a cheaper Elite controller, maybe to compete with the slightly cheaper price of the PlayStation DualSense Edge. So as we know, I believe the Elite 2 controller default that's been existing for a while now is around $180. So it's quite steep, I would say. I believe the DualSense Edge is around a similar price point. I'm going to look again on that. We do see here that the Elite Controller Series 2 Core is a new announced release that, besides this obvious color change here, you get a white and black kind of color scheme here. It also has less features in the normal Elite controller. So it's still an Elite controller. It has that heft. It has that weight, that premium, I would say manufacturing here that's a little more, high price materials over the default Xbox controller, which I have one on my desk here. I always kind of have sitting here, and that'll show up on screen. So this default base controller, again, is you pay about $60-$70 for this, similarly to the DualSense. That being said, the quality of this, again, it's still a great controller, decent plastics. If this was back in the 360 or the Xbox One generation, this would probably be my favorite controller ever. I think it's great. Ergonomically, it's probably the best Xbox controller ever. So I do believe that. That being said, the DualSense original, not the Edge yet, even the DualSense original base controller that's around $60-$70 feels so much more premium than this one, and feels like what I imagine. And I've never held the Xbox Elite controller, so that I do have a bit of a blind spot here when I talk about this, but the DualSense to me feels like what I imagine the Elite controller probably feels like, a little more hefty, heavier, some almost metal type, plastics, hard plastics, quality materials there. That's what the DualSense normal feels like to me. So to have this DualSense Edge release with all of those custom features, like the interchangeable thumbsticks, the trigger limiters there, if you will, where you can limit your trigger to have a shorter action, you can shoot faster, in most games, or hit the button faster. Those back pedals that a lot of people use for alternate actions to not have to use the buttons. There's a lot that goes into that again gives the Elite a step up over the normal DualSense. So when you have the DualSense Edge come out that has basically all of those features, different profiles for different games, it's interesting to see that it has a slightly, similar or cheaper price point at that higher, price there, but doesn't have that bonus of this is also the premium feeling controller, because it already kind of is the DualSense. The DualSense base controller already kind of has that perk. So to see where the Xbox respond here with the Core, again, I'm not sure this was a direct response to the DualSense Edge that happened like a week and a half ago. I'm not sure they had a whole R&D team design, research and development, a new Xbox Elite controller that quickly. Maybe they did. Again, they did just change the color and then take a few parts out of the box, so it could be that quick of a design adjustment. I'm not sure there how quickly they could pull that out. But that being said, you see here it's essentially the same controller, the same weight, the same heft. You have those adjustment tools and the cable here, but you don't have the carrying case. The different types of paddles that you can interchange, the different types of thumbsticks you can interchange, the additional D-pad. You don't have any of those extra features. And again, it is more of like a premium Xbox controller for someone who doesn't want to get all the way into that tinkering, I guess, and really customizing it to their certain feel. They just want a more premium, more, slightly customizable controller. And if they want to ever upgrade, they can always buy, I believe Sony now has around, it's about $60, but you can get a full component pack, which comes with all of this stuff here. But again, that's $60 is basically the price of a full controller to get just add-on components here. Again, $120, $130, you're paying for basically two controllers plus $60 on top of that brings it up to around, again, $130, that's $190 almost. So it would make more sense probably just to buy the Elite controller for $180 if that's your plan in the future. Again, it's an interesting price model here. It seems like a bit of an answer to Sony's original answer to the Elite controller and the kind of the a more competitive pricing scheme here, similar to what they did with the Xbox Series X and S. It's like this is almost the Xbox Series S announcement for the controller here, if you will. They just have it's the white console with less features, a little cheaper. It's interesting that they kind of did a similar approach here with the Elite controller. That being said, we'll have to see how this pans out for them. I'm very much a fan of the DualSense. I think if I'm playing on PC, now that we don't have to worry about having a custom app like the DS4 app for the DualShock 4, if you could just have native DualSense support in a lot of PC games, I'm of the notion of I prefer that controller. Then again, to each their own. So I know some people don't really like Rumble and rather take Rumble out of their controllers. I had a friend who actually just purchased a Scuff controller recently for PlayStation, not knowing about these new DualSense Edge announcements and all that. But he was fine with it regardless because he actually didn't want Rumble. He got all the Rumble motors taken out of it to make the controller lighter and easier to hold and play with. So, again, to each their own. Everybody has their preferences here, what they want to customize their controller to. And there are other third-party companies that do the similar things in different directions, more custom designs maybe that you can't get here. So again, to each their own, wherever you decide on the controller space here, you don't really need a pro controller if you're just kind of casually gaming. But if you're into that, if you game a lot and you really want something that's really custom on your own, there's a lot of options now, that's for sure. And of course, I would mention the Xbox Design Lab as well, because they do have a lot of options to customize these now. I believe they just added the Elite controllers to the design lab, so you can go in and do custom colors and put your name on it. Again, there's some third-party companies that probably have some more custom stuff that goes a little further on that with different designs. But again, Scuff is a very notable one in custom controllers. But then again, pretty cool stuff. But I want to move into some more interesting gaming news here because, getting away from all of the console and peripheral stuff, there's a lot going on in terms of Call of Duty and the gaming space here and the competition there. With exclusive games. So briefly, I want to jump on Call of Duty. This is the smaller Call of Duty story. We're going to get into the meat of the story here, the big headline this week for Call of Duty. The first one, though, from Microsoft is that Project Aurora, which is something we heard about recently. I'm just going to take a sip of water here real quick. This game is something we heard about recently for mobile. We didn't hear much else about it other than it was being worked on for mobile from Activision. We now know that is Call of Duty Warzone Mobile. So, of course, Call of Duty Mobile, the base game, has been actually very, very popular on mobile for quite some time here. There's a lot of classic Call of Duty maps, small, PvP gameplay, small arena type, classic Call of Duty kind of gameplay. But now we're seeing a full-fledged Warzone app being made for mobile, assuming this is going to be built off Warzone 2, which is coming out after Modern Warfare this fall, in probably spring 2023. In a few months here, we're going to get Warzone 2. Probably alongside Project Aurora, which we now know is Call of Duty Warzone Mobile. So not much else to say here. Again, I did get some more details in the article here exactly about what's going on here. But then again, there's not much they even know here in the press about exactly what's going to come for this game. That being said, we do know that it's coming early 2023, I believe. Again, it's very up in the air here. We got some new announcements this month for Call of Duty Mobile in general, not Warzone Mobile, just the existing Call of Duty Mobile, which they got a new map. They got some new updates there. And I believe, again, like we said here, Call of Duty Next is coming up. Again, I wanted to leave that for the end here because that's coming up next week, but that's something I'm definitely going to cover on next week's show. It's going to be a huge show next week. We're going to have Call of Duty Next, that announced. We're going to have the Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft events. We have the Disney Marvel Game Showcase tonight. We have the Nintendo Direct. So next week, stay tuned. Probably going to be like a 2-hour show next week. I'm not sure if I can even shorten that show because we're going to have a ton of these conferences to cover. That being said, we'll probably hear more on Project Aurora later next week with the Call of Duty Next announcement and hear more about what Warzone Mobile is going to look like. Maybe we'll get some gameplay. But again, that's about it for Warzone Mobile. The big news here is really the future of Call of Duty and the continuing conversation around that. So as you may have seen in past episodes, and really since Activision has been bought from Microsoft, really, we've been talking a bit about, will certain games stay exclusive? What is Microsoft's plans here? Do they want to take Call of Duty for themselves? Do they want to do exclusive content drops like Sony has been doing? If you look all the way back, I want to say 10, 15 years ago, back when Xbox had a partnership with Call of Duty and Activision, they were doing things like you get the map packs a month early, or you get early access to, other DLC events or the beta before the game comes out. You can play it a little earlier. You can, get access to the trailer, things like that. They were always incentives to be on Xbox. At a certain point, Sony partnered up with Activision and things basically flipped. You were getting, Call of Duty exclusive DLC, early access to certain modes. I remember when Call of Duty Infinite Warfare came out, and it was the only way you could purchase the Modern Warfare Call of Duty 4 remaster. That was a big deal at the time. The only way to get Call of Duty 4 remaster was not only you had to buy Infinite Warfare Special Edition, but if you were on PlayStation, you got it like a month early. So people on PlayStation had that game basically as an exclusive game for about a month before Xbox players were able to play Call of Duty 4 remastered. So PlayStation has had that exclusivity for a while. They've taken advantage of it for a while. And now that Activision has now been acquired by Xbox and, of course, is back under the Microsoft wing of things, it remains to be seen how things are going to change. At the time, Jim Ryan of PlayStation was very clear that Call of Duty was important to our players. Phil Spencer of Xbox is very clear that they have no intentions of taking it off PlayStation for the considerable future. They think, obviously multi-platform cross-play this game makes it a monolith, and to take it off those platforms just financially, it seems like it wouldn't make sense for Microsoft at all, knowing how PlayStation may very well be their biggest platform now for Call of Duty. It's probably the biggest console gaming platform at the moment. So, again, you have PC players, you have Xbox players being one, but then again, I'm not sure Xbox and PC players combined even make up the PlayStation player base for Call of Duty or some other of these large titles just because of how many players are playing on that console. So for Xbox, it wouldn't be a smart move. It probably stands. It wouldn't be a smart move to take it and make it exclusive. That being said, Sony has not been too happy about them owning Call of Duty, the biggest franchise on the market. As they would be a little nervous, for that. There are concerns about, is this a monopolizing move? As we saw with the Brazil regulatory board, where it's still kind of the source of a lot of this drama, who have been asking Microsoft questions, in terms of this actively ongoing acquisition of Activision and whether this will pass or not. Is the big question is this going to be harmful for the industry at large? Does this make it harder for companies like Sony, Nintendo, even Embracer, EA, Take-Two, other large publishers, Ubisoft, other large publishers to be able to make larger moves if Activision and Microsoft are taking such a large chunk of the market here? So again, it remains to be seen what happens there. But getting into the story here, that kind of the nastiness, if you will, is what I said earlier, where we have these executives really throwing shots here and putting this in the public discourse. So this comes of way of Jim Ryan, his response. If you hadn't seen what Phil Spencer said, he basically reiterating what I just said before, had made comments that for the foreseeable future, we are honoring, of course, Call of Duty's current contract with Sony, which remains for the next 3 years, I believe. So for the next 3 releases, whether that's Modern Warfare 2, and again, whatever's happening next year with that kind of Call of Duty has a release, it doesn't. We're going to see some combined efforts there from studios. Again, I'm not sure exactly what's, the knowledge there, or what we could, divulge on that, but I know something's going to happen next year, and then we're going to get a 2024, I believe, full-fledged release from Treyarch. So at least for the 2023 and 2024 content drops, those, games, DLC, whatever they're going to be, Warzone expansions. Again, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but whatever happens in the next 3 years or so here for Call of Duty is still 100% on PlayStation. No doubts about that. And then on top of that, Phil Spencer of Xbox has said that he can guarantee that for the next at least the 3 years or so after that, even, that they have no plans of taking it off PlayStation or eliminating any deals there. I could very much see, once this PlayStation deal expires, that immediately Microsoft's not going to be giving Sony those like month, long early access periods, or, first dibs on the DLC or the battle pass to PlayStation players and not Xbox. That stuff's definitely going away. I could definitely see in the next 3 years, once this really solidifies, this becomes a day one Game Pass game. It becomes, play the beta early on Xbox. It becomes a full-fledged Xbox vehicle there. I totally see that happening. Then again, to take it off of PlayStation platform, I don't think that's a concern. I think it's still going to be on Sony's platform for $70 day one, like usual, and millions of people will pay for it. It's probably the most played platform at the moment for console gaming. So it wouldn't make any sense for Microsoft to eliminate that. They could surely incentivize Game Pass and incentivize Xbox even more by saying, hey, it's free over here. We always got Call of Duty. We own it. But you can keep paying $70 and it's on PlayStation and it's all there. And we're not stripping any content from it or making it exclusive. It's there. It's cross-platform, cross-play, all the stuff we already love about it. But if you want all that early access, and if you want to be at the home of Call of Duty, you got to go to Xbox. So that seems like the way he's running it. Again, Phil Spencer is obviously, he's made a lot of comments about how he's trying to be pro gamer here, pro for, he's pro everyone being able to play. At the end of the day, though, I'm sure he's doing what's best for Xbox, and he's pro Xbox and pro Xbox boosting their platform 100%. There's a lot of, before I even get into this story here, because I see there's a lot of, online discourse about it. You get a lot of like that console wars stuff, if you will, from a lot of people online, where I feel like these conversations can kind of almost devolve into like where I think it's almost like middle school, stuff with consoles, where it's like, oh, I have the PlayStation, you have the Xbox, so I hate, I hate this console, or whatever. I think people get so combative or defending of their own platform wherever they play on, where it gets a little too heated and a little too I would say, angry, really. I think people get really upset about this kind of stuff. And again, I'm very passionate about my games as well. I totally get, we love these, these platforms, these video games. And when you hear that, your favorite thing, you may not be able to access that, or you may not be able to, on a certain platform, I totally understand why people can, be upset about certain announcements like that. That being said, I don't think this is something to, be super, upset about or anything like that. We see here that Jim Ryan, though, of course, probably very concerned about this Microsoft acquisition of Activision here, is very much not happy here. And the PlayStation and Xbox fan bases have been discussing this quite a bit. So getting a little deeper into this article, again, I gave a lot of prelude there to the article. Jim Ryan has said that all of this talk here, even Microsoft, promising, no exclusivity, Call of Duty's fine, it's going to be on PlayStation. After all of that, Jim Ryan has still publicly stated that not only is he not happy, with that, but he thinks that deal is inadequate on many levels. So getting into this a bit here, I don't want to speak too much outside of what Jim Ryan has said officially. I do want to hone in on his quotes here, but I do think this is the quote here I found that I really struck me, where he said, I hadn't intended to comment on what I thought I understood to be a private business discussion, but I feel the need to set the record straight because Phil Spencer brought this into the public forum, quote unquote. So, of course, you can see here Jim Ryan not very happy with this being a public discussion, or the future of Call of Duty being this much of an open topic here, I guess, as you could see. Again, going back to what I just said more about Phil Spencer, he said that Xbox had provided a signed agreement apparently to Sony, not just a statement from Phil Spencer here, but a signed agreement to Sony, guaranteeing Call of Duty on PlayStation with feature and content parity. That's important. Like I said, all the same features, all the same modes, all the same content. There's no, nothing being stripped from the PlayStation version. Again, full parity there for at least several more years, and that's where the kind of vague language is there, for at least several more years beyond Sony's existing contract with Activision. So again, we got about 3 more years there on the existing contract, so there's guaranteed nothing to happen with Call of Duty on PlayStation. And then we have a signed Xbox contract here. Again, it's weird that it's signed and it's official, but there's no actual end date here. It just says for at least the next several years. So remains to be seen exactly what the language of that means. I think that's why PlayStation is probably not happy with it, because that's very broad language for a contract, and it guarantees, I guess, at least a year or 2 with that diction, but really not much more than that. So remains to be seen here exactly what's going on there with that signed contract and how that's going to play out. That being said, Sony's obviously not happy with that. Jim Ryan made it very clear here he's not happy with what Phil Spencer has offered. He's even gone further here to say, I believe he said here that Microsoft has only offered for Call of Duty to remain on PlayStation for 3 years total after the current agreement between Activision and Sony there. So that clarifies that. He's clarifying the marketing speak of that contract that they had said earlier, Phil Spencer had mentioned earlier. He said their proposal, should go back to the last sentence there. After almost 20 years of Call of Duty on PlayStation, their proposal was inadequate on many levels and failed to take account for the impact of our gamers. We want to guarantee PlayStation gamers continue to have the highest quality Call of Duty experience, and Microsoft's proposal undermines that principle. So very direct, very anti-Microsoft quote there that he is saying Microsoft is undermining a promise for PlayStation gamers. So here's where a lot of the fan discourse got heated here. I saw a lot of stuff online calling this hypocritical of Sony. Before I get into any of the vitriol of online, because I that's where I think it was very unacceptable. I see a lot of these announcements where people get so, like I said before, very heated, very vitriolic, a lot of, things that, unsavory things online. I don't take any of that into account as news. That's just, the online interactions, unfortunately, are going to be very chaotic from time to time, especially in the entertainment industry. Unfortunately, you see a lot of people that get very passionate, maybe younger people as well, that say things that are very insensitive and, again, just way too overblown for situations like this. So not taking any of that into account, but just the overall, some of the more, I would say, public discourse on this and some people that were really, generally interested in talking respectively on this topic, I saw a lot of people who still were fairly upset and were saying this is kind of hypocritical marketing speak here because, like I said before, we all know that these companies are doing what's best for their business. PlayStation's going to do what's best for PlayStation. Xbox is going to do what's best for Xbox. Of course, I expect that. I don't see any of that being blindsiding to me when things like this happen that are pro, just for their company. But it is tough when you make these comments here, like saying pro consumer or pro gamer, or Phil Spencer saying things like we don't believe in exclusive games. PlayStation even saying things like that used to be against that they believe in generations and they believe in having exclusives to PlayStation. Now go back on that and now say that in the past, where they didn't support a lot of what Xbox was doing, obviously they had to take note and they had to adapt. They had to make PlayStation Plus into a pseudo Game Pass. I shouldn't even say pseudo. It really is a Game Pass experience. And PlayStation Plus really almost is hitting a parity there with Game Pass, I would say, arguably at this point, where it really is the same offering except for the day one stuff. So that's the problem there, where PlayStation's, I kind of agree here, is a bit hypocritical, where they're trying to have the best of the both worlds here. They're trying to say we're not Xbox and we're not going to water things down and give everything out on the streaming service. It kind of waters down our quality of our high AAA, high quality games, these big blockbuster releases. We believe in that. So we believe in charging $70 for these huge games, but we're also going to start a subscription service similar to Xbox is doing, charging monthly for that as well, charging double the price of PS Plus, which honestly isn't that, unreasonable of a deal. It's actually a really good deal when you think about it. It's paying about the price of 2 games for unlimited access to hundreds of games for, a whole year. It is, the pricing works out there, and it's very similar to Xbox Game Pass pricing. So it all makes sense. That being said, I feel like Xbox, it has a little more of the benefits there, where you have things go to Game Pass day one. If it's an Xbox exclusive, you're playing that on Game Pass. You're probably going to have to be not paying for Call of Duty soon in a few years here on Game Pass once that becomes a thing, as well as some other games. So they go for a lot of parity there at PlayStation, but they fall short on some areas, and they still criticize Xbox for, I think, making moves that are very, anti-consumer, they would say, by taking things exclusive. Meanwhile, Sony, on the same hand here, is gunning to find their own live service games, their own exclusive games that could do the same thing. So again, it makes sense why they're not happy. I totally get why they're not happy. But to then, say that Microsoft is unique in that, it does sound a little corporate speak there, where it's like, that is something that's kind of happening on both sides here, when I say, look at their business practice, what they've been doing, and so forth. So again, it's a little bit tough there to see that the companies are really butting heads here. Jim Ryan and Phil Spencer, again, not very, the CEOs of these companies, not really on great standing right now, unfortunately. They have this, these negative public comments against each other. So it remains to be seen with the future of Call of Duty there. A lot going on there as well. I apologize. I had to do a quick break on the show here. We will be back in about 30 seconds. I apologize. I'm just seeing a thing on the computer that has to be addressed. One moment here, everyone. All right, and we're back. Apologies for that. Just had to address something on the computer here, but we are back into the show. No worries. There are no technical difficulties. We are on track here. So we're going to keep going there, actually. Again, just kind of wrapping up what I was saying, I do think that Call of Duty is in a very precarious spot right now. It's very interesting what's going on with that, especially considering the nature of all the other high-profile shooters right now. Obviously, Halo's kind of in shambles to an extent. Battlefield's kind of in shambles to an extent. And then you don't have, again, when you think about the big three, it used to be a big three of shooters was Call of Duty, Halo, Battlefield. Again, there is Apex Legend there. There is other stuff going on in the battle royale space. Again, there's Fortnite. I don't know if you call that a first-person. I'm really talking first-person shooters here, not just third-person shooters. And again, the live service atmosphere of the industry has kind of changed the game of this a bit. But that being said, Call of Duty has been this monolith. Other shooters are not the monoliths they are, and Call of Duty really is still that crown jewel right now. Who's going to have control of Call of Duty? It's still very important, regardless of the fatigue on the series, regardless of the history. It remains to be the top seller almost every year. In terms of the the FPS space. Of course, there are exceptions of games like Elden Ring and Grand Theft Auto, of course, being the most notable. But Call of Duty really is like other sports games at the time, but even dwarfing them. Call of Duty really is that industry behemoth, and it's clear that all of these studios here are looking to get their piece of the pie We're gonna see how that actually plays out, but it's very interesting. That being said, I think Sony, on the other hand, has their own plans here. We're gonna get back into that later in the day, actually, with Deviation Games. They have a lot of former developers from other high-profile FPS franchises who are coming together to make create an FPS game. There's actually been some shakeups there. Something I'm wondering about in the next Sony conference if we hear more from them. It's been a while since we've heard about that. So again, Sony has plans to make shooters to compete here, but then again, who knows how a COD competitor in 2022 is going to perform? That's a very, very industry-changing type event. We'll see if that actually pans out. But speaking of the other shooters here being in shambles, I do want to talk a bit more about Battlefield. We did get some more updates on that this week, actually. Speaking on Season 2 updates, I'm not sure if we did cover them on the show a few weeks back. I may have it. We had a big week that week as well. I had to skip over some of the Season 2 updates for Battlefield. But similarly to what we talked earlier on the show, Battlefield, unfortunately, 2042, I should note, Battlefield 2042 has been a little bit too little too late, at least in my opinion, in terms of content drops and the post-launch support here. We do see, they have added some, one or two new maps. They have added some updates to some pre-existing maps where they've added some cover and like storage containers and stuff that create some of the, more cover and layouts in the large empty spaces in a lot of the maps in the game. That being said, they have heard the complaints. It seems that Battlefield is kind of getting through putting Battlefield 2042 into like an okay state, and then they're moving on to the next titles. It seems that that's the move here. But we get a press release here actually straight from EA that Battlefield is not only working on these new experiences, but they actually are developing a brand new studio. And this studio is called Ridgeline Games. I'm not sure if we have their new logo here, but if I zoom in on this new press release kind of screenshot here, sorry for that big jump on the screen there. But as you can see, Battlefield is now not just DICE and Ripple Effect and Industrial Toys, but it's now Ridgeline Games as well. You can see that new logo there. That's actually a brand new studio just announced from EA here that's going to be working on a fully fledged single player experience set in the Battlefield universe, quote unquote. So again, what exactly the Battlefield universe is, I guess will remain to be seen. Obviously, we have Battlefield Bad Company being the closest to like a real great story narrative experience. If you're a fan of the Bad Company series back in the day, though, that's probably the closest we got to having like really strong characters in Battlefield. Of course, we had Irish and Wrecker and some of the fewer soldiers in Battlefield 4. If you remember, they had Irish come back for the cinematics of Battlefield 2042. Fortunately, the actor has passed since that. But unfortunately, that character cannot come back. That being said, those characters weren't really well known, unfortunately, to begin with. So it remains to be seen if they're going to continue off of the Battlefield like 2042 and Battlefield 4's universe that they kind of established there, where there is this like post-apocalyptic future resource war that Battlefield 2042 established. Not sure they want to jump too much deeper into the Battlefield 2042 brand, considering how it's already been kind of, for lack of a better term here, it's sullied, I guess you could say, over the past 2 years or so. I'm not sure if Battlefield 2042 story experience will really be a big seller or a very big, attention catcher, if you will. So again, not sure exactly where they go with that. That being said, we also heard, I do want to move on just from this press release because it is included this press release here, but we do have some more. I have some more articles here to better illustrate some of the announcements here. We did get some more news as well from that multiple new Battlefield experiences are coming alongside that new narrative campaign. So we did hear that the narrative campaign is coming again, like I said, from that new studio, Ridgeline, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. That if we can I'm trying to see if they have that official press release here. I'm not sure if I could see that. Maybe on another article, I was missing that. But anyway, I digress. I don't need the image to talk about it. Marcus Leto, who is actually a former designer of Halo, he created Master Chief, co-created the Halo universe. So he's actually the one designing this new campaign for Battlefield, which is very interesting. Again, obviously, Halo is not in the best state right now. Seeing the Halo creator off helping in Battlefield, I'm almost saying, hey, maybe Halo's kind of in the same spot. Maybe he should go help and kind of help revive them over there with the Halo franchise. That being said, I'm hoping that over Halo they can figure out some talent over there to really revitalize that franchise. That being said, this is interesting for Battlefield. They're not really known for their narratives. Again, it's really been since Bad Company where they've really had a really full-fledged narrative experience that people were really happy with, I would say. Again, Battlefield 3 had a pretty cool campaign. Battlefield 4 as well. Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 had their war stories that weren't campaigns, but shortened single-player sequences. I wouldn't say those were exactly my cup of tea. I did play through some of those, but Battlefield has never, hasn't traditionally been huge on single player campaigns in the recent memory. And I do think that bringing in this new studio here, bringing in that talent from Marcus Lito and this new team, that's pretty exciting. And again, a lot of people were like, "What even is the Battlefield universe?" Is one of the things I heard a lot in reaction to that announcement. And again, like I said before, I tend to agree. I'm not sure exactly where they're going to go in their fiction of a lot of the narratives they've had for past Battlefield games, but curious to see what they do with it. Maybe they just take it in a new direction, which is probably a good idea, and maybe some sort of rebranding in some cases, and taking it with a new story, new characters, new setting. Probably a good idea for Battlefield. Again, we're gonna have to wait and see how that plays out. But this article also mentions that there are multiple other things going on. As we said, DICE is continuing to work on Battlefield's quote unquote multiplayer suite. So whether that's a new game from Battlefield, it's expansion of 2042, which I don't think it is, probably a new game, or whether they're doing something like Assassin's Creed Infinity, which you've heard of, and I'll talk about a little later with that showcase coming up, where it's a new platform like Assassin's Creed is doing, where multiple multiplayer experiences or single player experiences can be part of this larger evolving Battlefield client. We see that with Assassin's Creed coming up, where they're going to have multiple single player games and experiences all being part of their own games, but they're part of Assassin's Creed Infinity rollout as this whole new branding, multi-year branding. And we saw things like this being talked about in years past. I mean, speaking of Halo, we heard back when Halo Infinite launched, they said we want this to be a 10-year game, similar to Destiny. We want Destiny's the best, really, in practice example, I should say. Bungie's really doing what the new Halo developers want to be doing, where Destiny's been out for a long time. Obviously, Destiny 2 is a sequel there, but for almost, for many, many years now, year after year, there are new huge expansions that keep the game alive, evolve the game to new heights and to new areas. And if you're not an existing player, maybe too overwhelming to hop into, but if you are, and again, maybe not, maybe you can hop into it, but if you are, you have new content every year. It's really nonstop. And it seems that that's what Battlefield wants to do, Assassin's Creed wants to do. Even Call of Duty, they talk about having, maybe the first year ever, maybe not having a flagship title next year. But again, we're going to maybe get, things like Warzone 2. We'll get maybe those new Warzone modes we heard about, DMZ and Extraction, things we saw leaked from that NFL event that those players were taking screenshots of. So we've had the leaks on those. I have some of my, my own insights and ideas about what those could be. Then again, could that be a new branding for Call of Duty under Microsoft, where it's like Call of Duty, for lack of a better word, that infinite, cycle of new releases under the same banner, if you will, and having these kind of multi-year branding events to really solidify the fan base and get everything under one banner. So you don't have to worry about resetting every year and resetting your whole marketing push to a whole new game every single year. I think that whole practice of annual releases is really dying, even with our biggest, most prominent annual releasers, which have always been really Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, those big games. And we've seen in recent years that the status quo isn't really the status quo at all times. Things have been changing up for sure across the industry. So then again, that's about one of the last things on Battlefield. There's one last thing I wanted to cover, actually, that Battlefield veteran Lars Gustafsson, who is actually known as Mr. Battlefield, if you know, in the community for quite some time, is leaving EA and leaving DICE amidst this decision. So for better or for worse here, Lars Gustafsson has been through it all with Battlefield, for better or for worse, through some of the heights about the Battlefield series, unfortunately some of the lows over the past few years. He has been at the helm. So this is not, I would say it's a bittersweet moment for Battlefield fans for sure, especially those that are, have been fans of all the work that DICE and him has done in the past. I mean, been there for, I want to say 20 years. Yeah, 2000 exactly. So that's really over 20 years he has been in the studio, and it's been a really big part of Battlefield. The entire, conception, release, popularization, all of the entire franchise. He's been every step of the way. So, it's nice they give a nice send off to him. I did see yesterday, throughout their press release, which I think is very nice. Maybe this is a good thing, for new talent that, obviously with, I hate to say, anything negative here. I'm sure that he's done a ton of awesome work on Battlefield, but unfortunately with the recent status of Battlefield and how Battlefield 2042 has struggled, hopefully maybe this switch here to new management, to new teams and things, and diversifying the teams out from just DICE. You can see now they made it clear that it's not just DICE who's working on Battlefield anymore, but you saw that screenshot on the last article. I'll pull that back up. But it was everyone under this committee here that EA has developed to get all the way back to that press release. There we go. Has developed here. So you have, of course, EA and the Frostbite engine. That's just, the engine they're building on. But you have Ridgeline Games, Industrial Toys, Ripple Effect, and DICE. That's 4 studios there, all working on the future of Battlefield. Again, their future of multiplayer, the future of single player. They're talking about that very broadly. Whether or not those will be their, a game together, that probably would make sense. I believe they did confirm that it's not a campaign for 2042. So regardless if it continues 2042's themes or anything like that, it's not being added to that app. It is not part of 2042's game. So it's standalone. That's very clear, as we do know. But again, that's kind of the gist of it for Battlefield. Switch up there at the studio, new things being worked on. Again, we'll have to wait and see the new management, what they can come up with. What's going on with those multiple, again, we heard multiple new experiences from Battlefield. It's a new multiplayer, new single player narrative from Ridgeline. Again, a lot going on there, a lot of moving parts at EA, a lot of moving parts everywhere. It's a big new summer for a lot of I feel like this summer has been the switch up summer and the reorganization summer of the industry. And I feel like a lot more shows, we're going to get a lot more game announcements and a lot more going forward. I say that every week, but it's really crazy. Some of the really interesting decisions that I've been seeing here from these companies, these restructurings. And it's unfortunate that we had to go through a lot of these, unfortunately, not ideal game releases to get to this point, but it seems like the industry is very aware of the new price where, things are getting more expensive, more complicated. I think people are getting aware of how things are changing, and we're really moving into this new era of gaming, which is going to be really interesting to see. So again, I digress there. We're going to move on to what I spoke about earlier. We have a few more things here. We're almost done. We have this actually our last story before we get into our predictions for the weekend. And I'm going to finish before the half hour here. We're at 2:20 about. I'm going to try to finish before 2:30 here and get us out of here pretty quickly. So we're going to go through this one pretty quick here. This is Deviation Games. Like I said before, we got a new announcement from them. This is a company, again, under PlayStation, who PlayStation's been investing in a new AAA original IP, assumedly FPS experience under Sony to be exclusive for PlayStation. So could this be a COD competitor, a Halo Battlefield competitor? Who knows? But we're going to release this new statement here. We got news that we did have some shakeups, not only some departures at Deviation Games, but also some additions. So I'm going to read this one out. It's not too long, but I guess I'll just read this out for everyone here. So we see that Deviation Games announcing that Jason Blundell is leaving the studio. We appreciate the contribution Jason has made, and we wish him the best in the future endeavors. But Deviation will continue to be led by CEO Dave Anthony, who also assumed the role of game director this past year. Again, I'm assuming from Jason Blundell, he's now game director, and remains a guiding force as we look ahead. We are also excited to announce that Louis Castle has joined Deviation Games as Senior Vice President of Development. Sounds like a very important role there. A video game industry veteran who has 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards. Louis co-founded Westwood Studios and is best known for creating the legendary Command & Conquer franchise. Louis is joined by an incredible roster of industry veterans who recently joined the studio, including God of War alumni Jonathan Hawkins and Dean Reimer, and Call of Duty Black Ops guru Tony Flame from the Black Ops series, if you remember that name. This plethora of talent here makes Deviation uniquely equipped to continue leading the ever-evolving games industry into the future, including with the continued development of our previously announced groundbreaking original AAA IP. So again, as I said there, of course, we see that Jason Blundell has left the studio. I believe he was the previous director there. And in wake of his departure, I believe CEO Dave Anthony is taking over. So again, not the most positive news there at the top. But if you do remember, I think it was back in 2021, maybe back in 2022, that we saw them reveal Deviation Games at the Summer Game Fest and talk about Sony for a bit. And I believe the pair, both Dave Anthony and Jason Blundell, were there speaking on the fact that they had an original IP and they are drawing on what they've learned from creating multiple games. And think about that. It's former Call of Duty there, former God of War, Command & Conquer. I believe we heard some people from Halo, if I'm mistaken. I may be mistaken there. Maybe I'm remembering that Marcus Leto comment on Battlefield, maybe. So I don't want to say that, but, mistakenly. But I do know there's a lot of diverse talent there, a lot of people who've had different experiences in the industry. It's not, again, another developer here that is unproven, but obviously has, the buildup and the wherewithal of a lot of industry talent. So it's not like they're unproven talent per se. I probably shouldn't use that word, but this is an unproven, as a collective, as a new studio, they haven't, really made their market. So very interesting to see what comes to Deviation. Again, that's I'm going to move on here as we're trying to get done these last 10 minutes here on the show. But again, another studio that could be at the eventual probable Sony showcase, whenever that happens. But speaking of showcases, here we go. It's the end of the show here. Finally, we're getting into the prediction zone here. So this comes via Twitter, a lot of these announcements. We did get another update via Jeff Grubb over at GamesBeat, who's always updating us on very often Nintendo news, but on a lot of gaming news over the week. So we did hear from Jeff last week that Nintendo Direct was still happening. definitely happening in September. Maybe this week, maybe next week. Again, we've gone through the whole week. That didn't happen. We did hear that maybe it could have been due to the passing of Queen Elizabeth II in the UK. Maybe Nintendo has delayed some of their events due to sensitivity of that. That being said, Disney hasn't delayed anything. Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft didn't delay anything this weekend. So the rest of the gaming sphere hasn't really reacted to that. Any national events, international events, I should say, like that. That being said, there was a rumor that Nintendo did delay for that very reason, but we are now hearing today again from Jeff Grubb that it does sound like the Direct is still on, and if it gets moved around, it'll probably be a very minor adjustment. So expect it early next week. Early next week, as I'm recording this, being Monday, early September. I believe it's the week of the 10th, I want to say, or the week of the 12th, rather. So Monday the 12th. So from the Monday the 12th, from to Wednesday the 14th, I would say it's within those 3 days. So I think 12th, 13th, 14th, maybe we get an announcement this weekend, or maybe we get an announcement on Monday that's for Wednesday. Either way, I think the Nintendo Direct is happening very imminently. So again, what can we see there? I'm going to be very brief here. We talked about maybe those Zelda remasters. I believe it was Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. I know there was that Wind Waker remaster on Wii U that a lot of people unfortunately didn't get to play because it was on Wii U. That being said, there are rumors about a new HD remake for 2 of those Zelda games, so that could be pretty cool, as well as maybe news on Breath of the Wild too, the obvious, really hugely anticipated Zelda game. Maybe some more news from the other Metroid projects we heard about. Maybe something from Konami. I know that was kind of out of the box there. We did hear about that upcoming Tokyo Game Show announcement from them. That I'm just gonna put it aside here because this is something I actually forgot to put on the docket today. I do want to mention that Konami actually has. I'm not sure if I should assume this is a Konami, but I believe it is being developed by Konami, as their older games have. But I should say Nickelodeon actually announced through one of their performance calls this week that they have a AAA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game in development. So that's not a rumor. That's actually a fact coming straight from Nickelodeon and Viacom there, that there is a AAA Ninja Turtles game in development. So what exactly AAA means, I don't know. I don't want to get my hopes too crazy up here, but I'm a fan of Ninja Turtles. I always loved them when I was a younger kid. I loved the cartoons, and then 2000s. I watched the 80s and 90s cartoon as well retroactively. After that, I was a big fan of all of their games, the toys, everything about it. When I was younger, I was a big Turtles fan. It's still on to this day. I know a lot of people in the 80s and 90s, I grew up with the Turtles as well, and love the Turtles. So I think they've been bigger than ever recently. Actually, they actually have that Seth Rogen movie coming up during I believe mid next year. I know it's 2023, so maybe I think it's like a summer movie coming next year. So maybe it's a tie-in game to that. I'm not sure how that Seth Rogen's going to be. If it's going to be more cartoony, maybe a humor approach because Seth Rogen, maybe it's a little more adult and kind of goofy with that kind of Seth Rogen, a little more adult. What's the word? Teenage kind of humor, if you will. With the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm not sure exactly what the style is there. But seeing if there's a game, it can make sense to have a movie tie-in game, whatever that will be, we'll have to find out. But maybe that's announced at, that's the game that was announced at the Tokyo Game Show that Konami was talking about. Maybe that is announced at the Nintendo Direct. Who knows with the Turtles? They can kind of show up anywhere. But they have had some, I believe the Cowabunga collection did have a lot of reveals at Nintendo Directs prior. And as well as the Shredder's Revenge beat 'em up Ninja Turtles game recently. So that could be a Nintendo Direct announcement. I think that'd be really cool. That's kind of like my out of the box prediction. But we do know that there is a Ninja Turtles game coming next year, so we haven't heard anything about it. That'd be really cool to see. In terms of other games, maybe we get a Mario, updates on any of those games. We had a big year for Mario. We had Mario Super Strikers. There were the Mario vs. Rabbids announcements. Nintendo Switch Sports. Nintendo had a big year already, and I think Mario and some of their other IPs have been around the Switch a lot this year. So we'll see what's next for Nintendo. Again, I may not have as much insight as someone like these industry insiders who are solely focused on Nintendo do, but I do think Nintendo has some stuff up their sleeve. It's the end of the year. It's not a typical Nintendo Direct. I think we may get like E3 level, summer showcase level type announcements there. That being said, I'm going to take another sip of water here, and we're going to wrap up. We are very close to the end of the docket. That being said, we do have, as I said a lot throughout the show here, 2 more showcases this weekend. One is the Disney Marvel Game Showcase coming tonight. We're going to finish on that because I want to talk about that right before that we get into it. And we have the Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft Showcase tomorrow. So we have another update on here actually on Forbes. This is from Paul Tassi, who's a big Forbes editor on gaming. He does a lot of reporting on these exclusive stories. I see him report a lot on Destiny 2 updates as well. And I think it's one of his bigger games. Really, I've got a lot of really great updates here from Forbes as well. But we do get some news here this week that Ubisoft is not only showing, reporting back on the Jason Schreier story we covered, I believe, a week and a half ago, maybe on last episode, but I believe 2 episodes ago, where we talked about the Assassin's Creed Mirage rumors and all of that. We have some more updates on top of that, which actually confirm that not only are they going to be showing Assassin's Creed Mirage, potentially that AC1 remake, if that's real or not, we're not sure yet, but there were rumors that it's built on the same engine as Mirage, and that could be a real game. We're going to wait on that one, but we're also getting more Assassin's Creed games, reportedly 3 Assassin's Creed games at this conference. So there were rumors a few weeks back about the potential Ubisoft Assassin's Creed game called Project Red that was about a feudal Japan Assassin's Creed game. That's something that fans have clamored for years. I think back to even the Ezio, Italian Renaissance days of Assassin's Creed, where they were saying, where do we go next? Assassin's Creed 2, 3, Brotherhood days, 10 or so years ago. And I believe feudal Japan was one of the highest requested eras and, locations for a very long time. Then again, Assassin's Creed often said they weren't going to do that territory. A game like Ghost of Tsushima came out and did a samurai game. A lot of people said this was the Assassin's Creed Japan game we always wanted, but almost better or different. That was kind of the joke a lot of people made about it. Ghost of Tsushima upon its release. So to see that may be happening as well, we may get an announcement on that, as well as something else where we may have something. We're not exactly sure where this other one is located, but I did hear a few other rumors about, here it is, Neo Hex, where it could be set in the Holy Roman Empire again, which would deal with some of the witch trials in the Holy Roman Empire, which I've never heard of in the Roman Empire too much. Maybe I should know my Roman history a little bit better as an Italian as well. I don't know that part of Roman history very well. So to have that sounds like maybe it ties into supernatural with the witch trial, maybe because recent Assassin's Creeds have gone supernatural a bit, especially with their DLC, where it may not just be like the witch trials historically, but maybe actual witchcraft and supernatural elements of the gameplay. That could be very interesting. So very curious to see where Assassin's Creed goes next with all these stories. And again, as I was talking about with Battlefield and about the Destiny and that approach to having these infinite games, Assassin's Creed Infinity is apparently their overarching multi-year approach that's going to include all of these games as different modules. I almost think of how they used to organize the games in the fictitious world where you would play an Abstergo game. And if you don't know the Assassin's Creed series well, Abstergo is a company in the game that essentially sells DNA experiences or memories of ancestors. So you could play the memories of people's ancestors, which is what Assassin's Creed story is very much based around, the Animus, this device where you can go in and live the memories of people in the past. So there's these interfaces. I think a lot of it was in Assassin's Creed Unity, I believe, was one that did it very much this way, where they had these fake thumbnails that it was almost like a fake UI experience if you were in the fictional universe playing through these fake, these memories. And they had all these things. They had the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, they had Japan. They had things that were, maybe like planned through Ubisoft or just rumored, but weren't real games that were just on the menu to pretend like in this fake world, if you were, in the Assassin's Creed universe as a character, you could, do these experiences. So a lot of people said at the time, these could just be teases for like all these like hypothetical games that Ubisoft may work on in the next few years. And it seems like that's kind of panning out. I almost wish I could have a screenshot of that. Maybe I could pull one up very briefly here and get that up there. But I remember I was actually playing Assassin's Creed Unity recently, and that's why it's very fresh in my mind on the PlayStation Plus, where they had this like Animus menu, and I could see if I could find a screenshot here, because this came just came to my mind. I think it's a perfect example here that people really have. Yeah, this is it right here. People really hadn't talked about this in these rumors, but I think I kind of have a unique perspective here where I feel like this is something that really plays into this. So I'm gonna pull this up really briefly, and then we'll finish up here with the last comments on Disney's showcase. That being said, let me pull this up really quickly if I can and get that going. One moment, everyone. Here we go. Okay, so let me pull up this screenshot. Let me see if I can make that like full screen. Yep, so this is back. This story is in 2014 here. We see we got a press release. What is up with Assassin's Creed Unity's Helix menu? So I was just playing Assassin's Creed Unity over the weekend, totally unrelated. I was thinking of this conference coming up. Let's get a little bit back into Assassin's Creed. So I started playing. I was thinking about what's coming next for this weekend, and I saw this menu. And I didn't think much about it, and I just thought about it as I was talking about it now, and I went, oh my goodness, this may have some Easter eggs here. And as I look at it, I'm going to go, wow. So again, we have this Tragedy of Jacques de Millet, which is a mission you play at the beginning of Assassin's Creed Unity, as you're kind of like a person out of Sturgo. You're looking into these mini games of these memories, and you play this random kind of crusader mission that has nothing to do with the rest of the game. Then you go to France. But as you can see, you have other Assassin's Creed games here being these fictitious like in-world in-universe experience as if you were in the Assassin's Creed universe. And the Triumph of the Borgias, which is Assassin's Creed 2, the Lone Eagle, which is I believe Assassin's Creed 3, the prologue. This is Altair from Assassin's Creed 1. And then you have things like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood here, Florence with Ezio. But you also have things like the Emperor's Shadow, which seems to be in Japan. Never was a real Assassin's Creed game. Besides, there was one side-scroller Assassin's Creed game set in Japan that I think did take notes from this menu as well. But you have Liberation of Lady Aveline, which was Assassin's Creed Liberation, that PS Vita game, I should say. I haven't mentioned PS Vita in a while. Shout out to the PS Vita. And then was later on PlayStation 4. Again, you see Assassin's Creed 4 here, whatever, Kenway, Assassin's Creed 3. And then, again, everything else is unknown. So you see that Japanese game. You see the Bladed Cross, which looks like another kind of Holy Roman Empire type era, maybe, with nothing else about it. So that could be these two games here, Assassin's Creed Infinity, that could have been the story inspirations, years past in 2014, all the way back when this game is released. I was just thinking about this. I was randomly playing this game yesterday, and I saw this menu. And for some reason, I went, what a crazy, coincidence where I went, oh my goodness, this actually may have something to do with it. I didn't really think about it too in depth that I should talk about this on the show. But as I thought more about that, I went, wait, that's totally something I want to just mention briefly. But as you can see here, not only do we have Japan and we have what I think looks like a Holy Roman Empire, as I saw from those rumors from Ubisoft, we also have Jazz Age here with a kind of 1920s assassin. We have Hell in Hibernia, which I'm not sure exactly what this could be. We see a masked. It looks like almost some sort of like maybe there's a disease or a plague type era. I'm not really sure where this is based. But again, just an aside there, but maybe it could have some hints of the future of Assassin's Creed all the way back in 2014, years ago. We may have already had the hints that these games would eventually actually be made, and here they are. So we're going to see later what exactly these games look like, but maybe I'll go back to this and double check. But that's something maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's just an aside. I thought it was kind of an interesting aside. I wanted to just comment on that briefly. That being said, I do want to move on here. Again, like I said, wanted to get to the end of the half hour. It is 2:33. I'm going to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. And all I want to wrap up here on is finally the last thing. Again, stay tuned for Saturday for that Assassin's Creed showcase, by the way, just to wrap up on that story. That's going to be tomorrow on Saturday. We'll see all those announcements, and we'll be talking about it on next week's episode. That being said, what we'll also be talking about in next week's episode, which I'm hoping is some certain games here, is the Disney and Marvel showcase. And that's at 4 p.m. this evening. It's about 2:30 p.m. now as I'm recording this live if you're watching live. So if you're watching this later, this probably already happened as the Assassin's Creed conference may have already happened if you're watching this over the weekend. So my predictions here, again, I don't have any other articles like the Assassin's Creed one where we have actual concrete evidence for certain things happening here. That being said, I wanted to bring up this what to expect article here from IGN because they have a nice little rundown of things we've already heard about in the past that I think are very safe assumptions. And then I'll also personally talk about what I think are some of my assumptions or maybe some of my wishes for this conference. And then we'll wrap up here today. I'm trying to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so. Talk about this really briefly. The first things first, Disney Dreamlight Valley, something we talked about a ton on the show earlier in the summer when they announced this. This is something I would be shocked they didn't have at the Disney Games Showcase. The main Disney kind of Disney brand game right now is Disney Dreamlight Valley because it's really encompassing all of the, a lot of their main Disney IP. And not that, other IP like Star Wars and Marvel aren't owned by them, but I mean, under the Disney branding, I'm talking, Disney original movies, the parks, what you typically think of as Disney content, I would say that's probably the star of the show. Do we see anything else happening with Disney? I'm not exactly sure. Again, I think that Animal Crossing-esque, almost Stardew Valley-esque type game from PlayStation. I mean, rather, not just from Disney, rather. Again, I believe they revealed at the PlayStation with a PlayStation logo in another showcase. That's why I'm having that confusion there. But having that from Disney, I do think that is it enough for Disney this year for a whole showcase? Maybe or maybe not. Obviously, they have a lot more from Marvel and Star Wars, which I'm about to talk about. But then again, I think maybe we get another Disney property that we're not expecting. Maybe like a Cars racing game or something. I have no idea. But maybe something that like would come out of left field and go, oh, that's a Disney property that's not Marvel or Star Wars that I wouldn't really expect. But they're making it into a game form that could be really cool. There's a ton of stuff that Disney has that I think that it could be really cool. Maybe we can talk about that closer to the end here. But what we do know, they have getting into Star Wars here and Lucasfilm. We do know, obviously, KOTOR has been really shaken up with everything that's going on with Embracer Group acquiring, the studios of Aspire and everything else that's been moved the studios. I don't think we were expecting anything from KOTOR here, the PlayStation exclusive. I don't think we're seeing that for some time. Maybe they'll mention it. I would be kind of remiss I'm not sure I believe that would be the case. That being said, I'm not sure if they have any other, maybe Spider-Man 2. Maybe I'll get that in a second. That's probably my last topic here. But that being said, we did get news of course, that Star Wars Eclipse, I believe it was called, that was well on the back burner. I'm not sure we're going to see that game, but we also had news of other Star Wars projects in the works. Again, Star Wars, Lego Star Wars. I believe we'll probably get some notes there, maybe an expansion to the Lego Star Wars game from earlier this year. Maybe we'll get like a Mandalorian or an Andor or an Obi-Wan's TV show, Disney Plus type expansion from those. For getting on those games as well. I think, Amy Hennig's Marvel game is something that's been a big topic. A lot of people thought, there have been rumors of a potential Iron Man game being made again. I talked about on the show. There were other rumors about a potential Black Panther game being made again. From other studios even as well, maybe that weren't even Amy Hennig's studio. That being said, just last night we did get a rumor. I don't have an article. This was a Twitter rumor. I'm not sure how much credence this has. So I'll take this with a huge grain of salt. But we did get a rumor that Amy Hennig's game maybe again a World War II game where you play as Captain America, Black Panther, and other sort of Marvel characters, maybe from the X-Men universe and other characters that are there around that time, in a World War II game where you fight against the Nazis and Hydra, the fictitious kind of villain organization that if you may remember from the comics or the Captain America movies, if you're a Marvel fan, of course, Hydra. So very interesting idea there. Again, I'm not sure, there are comic books that have, those storylines that, there's precedent for certain storylines like that could happen. So not out of left field there, but again, it's a very unsubstantiated rumor. I haven't seen any like official sources or any like known leakers or rumor people that have verified this. Is really just a random account on Twitter that I saw from, but it did get a lot of attention. I saw people in the industry like Jeff Grubb, or Paul Tatz, people in the industry. I'm not sure, a lot of people on Twitter that are, journalists comment on it. So it is something I thought was worth mentioning for sure, that it had some journalistic attention, at least, maybe not a journalistic evidence or anything like that, but it did have some attention. So definitely worth mentioning. And again, just to wrap up here, Ubisoft Massive also had that rumored Star Wars game. We could see another Star Wars project coming up. Again, know nothing about that. We'll see, is it open world? Is it not? I believe that the developers of the Division are working on that. So we may get some more news on that. Maybe some even gameplay footage of the open world Star Wars game. That'd be incredible. And then we also, I'm hope I'm not losing my train of thought here. There's another thing we have on the docket for Star Wars. We talked about Amy Hennig's Marvel game. We talked about, the big one. How could I forget? Jedi Fallen Survivor. That's the one I knew. I almost thought which is assumed to remember, but after Jedi Fallen Order, previously in the past few years, we got Jedi Fallen Survivor's trailer this summer, and very much of a teaser trailer. We saw a bit of Cal, the Jedi, with his lightsaber. We also saw a blaster on his hips, and maybe some new blaster gameplay. We get some range gameplay there as well. Could be very interesting. We'll have to wait and see. But that, I think, is almost a shoo-in for the show. I'd be surprised if it wasn't there. We didn't get anything at the Star Wars Fan Expo. We thought we were. Besides that, we did get that teaser trailer, but no gameplay or anything else. And that game is like spring 2023. So I'd imagine maybe even a release date, maybe another gameplay showcase. We may get something big from Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Sorry, I apologize. Just getting a interruption here. But that being said, I do think that it remains to be seen exactly what happens to Jedi Survivor. I don't know, if we have like a full ranged gameplay section there, if we could be, I think they want to focus on the melee gameplay and that whole Souls-like atmosphere of, you're hitting these checkpoints, you're hitting these campfires, you're fighting boss battles, you have a limited number of lives. It very much has a Dark Souls-esque, they call it a Souls-like type game. I'm not sure if they want to incorporate a lot of ranged combat, but then again, Souls like Bloodborne, like you have like that, the flintlock pistol, like there are very much options for ranged combat. So I think that'll be an interesting gameplay element. We'll probably see if they add that in. And then the big one for me, of course, I'm a super big fan of Insomniac games and what they've done with Marvel and Spider-Man. So I'm gunning for a Spider-Man 2, anything at all, gameplay reveal, a release date, whatever they can give me. I'm down for that. I'm totally on board with any Spider-Man reveals. The big question there is Sony has been, very absent here. I'm saying that a lot. Where is Sony? Where is that conference? Everybody thought it was going to be like around this time today. It's been about a year since their last conference, so we're not sure why we're kind of still in the dark there if they're going to announce anything. That being said, if there was a time to talk about Spider-Man, it's this fall for sure, unless that game's delayed, or I hope not, or anything, or there's any complications there. But it's coming 2023. God of War's coming in November. We haven't heard anything there. So maybe not a big Sony showcase. Maybe we get another tease at Spider-Man and they say, hey, tune into like later on the Sony showcase. Maybe that's something that happens here. Maybe I'm not sure if Sony would want to do that. I had this conversation with a friend of mine. I'm thinking, would Sony want to announce their own conference or even give their, huge blockbuster hit announcement to another conference like that? Do they want to give it away to Disney when they could have that at their own conference and have their own big moment? Maybe not. Then again, personally, I'm just dying to see Spider-Man. So if I can see anything more about it, I'm going to be excited. That being said, there's Wolverine as well on the docket. I don't think they would show that Wolverine and not Spider-Man because it's coming afterwards, 2024 and beyond. That being said, it would be great to see from Insomniac this week at the Marvel Games Showcase. And then again, any of those hypothetical Marvel Star Wars games or any other Disney properties, we're going to have to wait and see. Then again, I do want to wrap up here. The show has been going a bit over time today. I do apologize. I do have to get running in a moment here. We had a lot to cover this week. So I do want to thank everyone again who joined in and stuck with me throughout all the gaming news this week. I do appreciate it. Obviously, things are quickly moving here. We got a lot going on this weekend, a lot going on at Game Announcements this weekend. So as I said earlier in the show, before I close off here today, stay tuned for next episode because we have the Assassin's Creed conference tomorrow. We have the Nintendo Direct. We have this Marvel Disney Games Showcase. We have the Call of Duty Next event next week. So that's at least 4, maybe even 5 showcases next week with game announcements. So get excited for next week episode 26. The 26th Analyst Report is going to be really jam-packed. So stay tuned. And again, that about wraps it up for me. I'm going to get going here today, guys. But I want to thank you all again here for joining me for the about an hour, 40-minute show we had. I want to have a great weekend. Have a great weekend and good luck with everything going forward here. But again, as you can see, I'm kind of rushing off. We're going to have to get going here. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and stay tuned for next episode. It's going to be awesome. I'm pretty excited to see what's coming up this weekend, so I can't wait. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.